I personally think the focus is more on institutions to hold these tokens for auditors to come in and track who has the liquidity, who owns it. But they're talking about fractional ownership, which makes sense. It's a good play. But I think the big play is institutions. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how real estate is also on HBAR. How RedSwan tokenized about $5 billion in real estate with HBAR. Why companies are doing this, and how do you make money from this? And what's the big picture? I'm going to be showing you what I see going forward. Stay tuned. Before I get started with the news, I wanted to show you how the entire industry, especially these big institutions, are focusing on moving all of their assets to the blockchain. And it's not just HBAR, it's also XRP and XLM. And I wanted to show you with app.rwa.xyz. This is one of their sites that they use to track pretty much tokenization that's moving on chain. So for example, this is US Treasuries, and they're just moving it on the blockchain. And so one of the big guys is BlackRock. And BlackRock, I also showed you in my last video, their focus is tokenization of all assets. And part of my theory and kind of my thought process with this is that I personally think that they ran out of things to bundle and sell to investors. And when I say things to bundle, I mean like mortgage-backed securities. There's a limit on how many new debt instruments can come online. And so the best way to do it, in my opinion, is move into a new system. And this new system is, you can pioneer adoption, you can pioneer all the regulations. So it's kind of a no-brainer for banks going forward. So the name of the game is to sell debt instruments and then offload it to investors. And those investors now are in a global market. And I'm going to show you with HBAR and how they're doing it with real estate. And so similar with all debt, you need to tie it to something. Yes, you can have unsecured debt, but it's better to have debt that's linked to an asset. So HBAR was chosen by this group called RedSwan, and RedSwan is an investment group for real estate, specifically commercial real estate. Yeah, and so they're trailblazing the market for this industry. And this is probably back in 2024, so this isn't groundbreaking news, but I brought it up because I wanted to show you that this isn't about necessarily owning full ownership like they're talking about. Yeah, like for example, they say unlike traditional real estate requiring full ownership, this is about fractional ownership. And so this goes back to what's happening in the marketplace where they're trying to find new ways to issue debt to individuals. And I personally think that they're tapped out. And so they need a broader investment base. They need more people. They need a different market. And what's the best market to do it on? On a new market that's global, like the blockchain. So companies, in my opinion, are more incentivized to own tokens rather than the actual title and maybe like the debt instruments that were in the past. The debt instruments are very similar to how they were in the past. The only difference is they are moving on the blockchain, like I showed you. So these debt instruments are being repackaged, repurposed, and put in a new system. The system right now is HBAR. And I talked about in my last video how that system is the validity to these coins. And it's a non-fungible token, but the difference is it represents assets on chain. So to read this, real estate asset tokenization can allow institutional investors to create a custom portfolio with tokens that match their investment thesis. I think this is more for auditors. It makes more sense to query a blockchain or a wallet address for all of the assets on hand versus the old system where I have to go through your books, I have to go through assets on hand, then the audit trails, et cetera, et cetera. It's a lot easier to query a Bitcoin address or an Ethereum address or an HBAR address and see exactly how much real estate you have. So you need companies that are tokenizing this so that institutions and boards can own it on their balance sheet for auditors to then check the audit trail. I mean, that's the natural progression of things that I'm seeing. So RedSwan is a company that's basically tapped into this market. So they're doing digital real estate and they chose HBAR. HBAR is cheap and I'm using HBAR too with my company. They're about $4 billion right now in tokenized real estate assets. and about $5.2 billion in the pipeline. The focus might be fractional ownership, but I personally think the focus is more about big institutions owning this. They're the ones with the liquidity pushing this, and they also want to be able to give it to a broader audience. For us, we can then potentially own a fractionalized ownership of this type of real estate that they're doing. And let me bring back this article so you know. Fractional ownership of high value properties. So they're trying to figure out a way, how do I take this huge commercial property and basically divide it so that we can finance it going forward? I mean, it's really smart. So one thing that RedSwan is doing different is that they're controlling the entire ecosystem of real estate tokenization. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but with Control Alts and the Dubai, what they did, they hired a company called Control Alt to then tokenize things for Pipco Mint to then sell it. So Pipco Mint was just the marketplace, but Control Alts was the one who handed the tokenization, the actual tokens, to Pipco Mint to sell. But with RedSwan, what they did, they're handling the entire process of it. And then they're also hosting the marketplace themselves, but they're controlling the entire process. And so that's interesting for liquidity. I personally think the marketplaces, there's going to be a few that are going to rise to the top. I don't see individual companies hosting their own marketplace just because of the development time and just the complexity of running your own marketplace. I think it's going to be the NFT stuff. I know, don't click off. But like OpenSea, how they just kind of controlled the market with that. And then the person who ran the marketplace got a lot of the fees. And then they're the ones who pretty much controlled everything. Tokeny is also a big one that I've mentioned a lot on this channel. And they're handling the marketplace for institutional investors for tokenization. So it'd be interesting to see if RedSwan also, sells some of their tokens to Tokeny. So I created this graphic to show you how RedSwan is using HBAR to tokenize these real world assets. It's $1,000 minimum, and it's a 24/7 global marketplace. And so just like OpenSea, they're controlling the marketplace for themselves, which I think is a smart business move. I just think it takes a lot of capital to maintain some of that, but then they can also collect the fees up front, and they don't have to worry about maybe Tokeny, the company, taking some of the profit. It makes sense. But I don't necessarily agree with that direction, because I personally think that maybe DEXs will come online and people will be more incentivized to buy real estate tokens from a decentralized exchange rather than a central exchange. But I don't know. We'll see what happens. Yeah, so $1,000 minimum, institutional grade office. So yeah, this is an example, Class A. And the whole goal of that is to basically figure out a way to take this, for example, this type of real estate, fractionalize it, raise funding, and then potentially buy more properties with your tokens that you're buying. So they got to figure out what properties to buy for the token holders to make a yield. And so they're talking about their former executives are going out and figuring out, okay, which one's a Class A and which one's a Class B property. And they're going to figure out, okay, how do I take this and how do I mint it, create a token that represents this real estate asset that they just bought. The compliance is going to be handled by them. They're going to own it, or at least the custody will be on HBAR, but in reality, they own the wallets that connect to the HBAR network. So the custody is there. It'll be in a stable coin. So that's why we're seeing all those stable coins popping up, because you need to represent the old into the new. So you get to own and track the tokens that you buy and potentially sell them. But the reality is they control the marketplace, through their marketplace. I personally think the focus is more on institutions to hold these tokens for auditors to come in and track who has the liquidity, who owns it. But they're talking about fractional ownership, which makes sense. It's a good play. But I think the big play is institutions. Growth is there. HBAR is fast and cheap. It definitely rose up 800% this year in the fees, but it's still fast and cheap. We got a lot of players with them, and it makes a lot of sense to use HBAR. I use HBAR with the company that I built. The growth for this market, specifically real estate, is there. The RedSwan CEO even talked about, hey, it's $75 trillion global commercial real estate market. So they're trying to figure out a way to fractionalize this. We got $5 billion today. It's going to be interesting to see where we're going to take this market. XRP is more of a, I see XRP as like the big settlement purchases, because you're going to need a token that has a lot of liquidity in it, and the price needs to be at a certain price point to facilitate commercial property. Same thing with HBAR. And so the fact that they're trying to sell commercial real estate, I mean, really think about the price tag of commercial real estate. And if it's moving on the chain like it already is, and we're already seeing all of these assets, real world assets moving on there, it begs the question that these coins are going to have to be at a price point to facilitate a lot of these trades. That's part of the reason why that cross-border payment narrative is so large, is because people see some of these numbers and they go, oh, 75 trillion. It's true, but it just takes a long time to get there. And so they have to develop the ecosystem, develop the marketplaces. They have to have these companies that are going to go out into the real world and then figure out a way to put it on the blockchain. So speaking of the blockchain and how things are moving to the blockchain, why aren't you moving to the blockchain? Why don't you get paid in systems like cryptocurrency, like XRP, like HBAR, and have it with you at all times? And so what I built was the WhatISupport Black Card. This is your digital crypto profile that lives on HBAR, but you get to carry it with you. It's an NFC tag. It also has a QR code. So when you create your profile, it'll be put on the HBAR blockchain for security. And so this is mine. And I carry this card with me wherever I go. And so when I want to, hey guys, want to pay me? Go ahead and scan this right here. And it brings up my WhatISupport profile. Appreciate everyone who already bought WhatISupport, and I'll see you in my next video. Thanks.